Hi all, this is a lesson on section 1.3, Government Intervention, focused on indirect taxes. First, we'll look at the distinction between direct and indirect taxes. I can see two ways that the term direct is appropriate here. Direct taxes are imposed directly on income, whereas indirect taxes are imposed indirectly on income. Indirect taxes are on consumption. However, since you need income in the first place in order to consume, they are imposed indirectly on income. Direct taxes also go directly to the government. When I get paid, I don't even get to see the portion that is paid in tax. It just goes directly to the tax office. Anytime you buy a good or service, you pay the GST, the Goods and Services Tax, an indirect tax. Say you buy a shirt, 10% of that original price is paid as tax to the shop, and then the shop pays that tax to the government. The government still receives the tax, but indirectly through the store. Now, why do we use indirect taxes? One goal is to raise revenue. What does the government need revenue for? Well, lots of things. They provide public goods like roads and rail, direct provision of services such as education and healthcare, and transfer payments to individuals. By charging a small percentage of the price of a good as tax, consumers will continue to purchase and the government will receive revenue. When this is almost every good and service like the GST is, the substitutes are also increasing in price, so there's little market distortion taking place. Now, governments also use indirect taxes because they do want to distort the market and change consumer behaviour. A general principle of economics is that if you don't want people to do something, you tax it. Alter people's incentives. Classic examples of taxes being used in this way are the cases of cigarettes and alcohol. To avoid market failure, which is the next section of the course, so we'll look at that soon, we want less of these items produced and consumed. Another way these taxes are used to limit congestion is to limit congestion in cities. This is another item that we'll be looking at more of in section 1.4. Now, we're going to draw some diagrams. We already know that a tax will shift the supply curve left. And we've been drawing the new supply curve as a parallel line, just like that. Now, we learn that it's not always parallel. So here I've drawn on where it is parallel, where a specific tax is applied. A specific tax is a fixed amount per unit, let's say $1 on each item. The producers are willing to supply less at each price, as now they have to give $1 per unit sold to the government. The new curve is parallel to the old curve, as the vertical distance between the two curves is the amount of the tax, so always $1. An example of a specific tax is the excise on petrol, which in Australia stands at about 40 cents per litre of petrol. An ad valorem tax, on the other hand, is a percentage of the original price. Note that this is written in italics because it's Latin and therefore fancy. Now, due to it being a percentage of the price, the new supply curve moves out from the original. It's not parallel. It starts close down the bottom left and moves outwards, moves further away from the original supply curve. As price rises, the amount producers pay in tax increases. As price rises, their willingness and ability to produce with the tax differs more and more from the original state. An example of an ad valorem tax is the GST. 10% is added to the original price. So, of course, the vertical distance between the curves increases as the price increases. Now, a common misunderstanding here is that the vertical distance increases as quantity increases, so as we move along this way. But that's not the case, so that's not how you want to explain it. You want to explain that it's as price increases. Now, make sure you know how to draw both of these diagrams. You'll be asked to do it and you have to be able to do it in a second, 2 seconds. Just be able to not think about it and draw these diagrams. Alright, so we know how to draw the diagrams, but now we need to know why we care about all of this. Let's start with consumers. Now I want you to pause here and draw up a simple demand and supply diagram, no tax, and draw on the consumer surplus. This is revision from a while ago, so you should be able to do this. Alright, so as I'm sure you got, the consumer surplus is the area above the equilibrium price and under the demand curve. Now, let's look at what happens to this area when an indirect tax is imposed. So there we are with our indirect tax. So we've got the new price. Whoa. We've got the new price. And the consumer surplus has shrunk. This shouldn't be a surprise, as the price has gone up, and due to the law of demand, quantity demanded decreases. Consumers get to enjoy less of the product, and the units of the product that they do enjoy now cost more. And that's due to the price rising to this P tax, the new equilibrium price when there's a tax. Okay, what about producers? How are they affected? Now, I won't make you pause and draw the initial producer surplus because you now know where that is. If consumers are up the top, then we know that producer surplus is under the equilibrium price and above the supply curve. But now what I want you to pause and have a go at is drawing what the change in producer surplus will be given the specific indirect tax. So draw up a new diagram, draw another supply curve that indicates the tax, and draw the new producer surplus. So pause and have a go. Okay, here's what happens. Now a common error here is to forget that while the producers receive the tax money in the first instance, they must actually pass it on to the government. It's not their money. So it's not their surplus. The surplus shrinks, in fact. So now we're just that little triangle down there. It only goes up to the new equilibrium price P tax, but then we take away this whole area here because that's what goes to the government. They have to pay that back to the government. This is the producers. P prod is what the producers effectively receive. So they take the initial total revenue, but then they've got to pass the tax on to the government. So all they receive is P prod. And we can see that also they produce less and they receive a lower price for each one they produce. So they get hit from two sides as well. Now, the government. The government receives the revenue from the tax. They get to do all the wonderful things that I mentioned earlier. We know that the vertical distance between supply curves is the amount of the tax. So the government gets this for the quantity sold, the new quantity sold. Now, we're going to wrap this up. We know the consumer and producer surplus in a free market. We know what happens to these with the imposition of a tax. They shrink. We also know where government revenue fits in, right here. But there's still a part of that original social surplus that's not accounted for. This triangle. This is the welfare lost to society as a result of the tax. Previously, this was consumer and producer surplus, but now it's lost. The society is no longer allocating enough resources to the production of the good. Okay, that's it for indirect taxes. I'm sure you've taken productive notes and are ready to tackle some questions in class. Thank you.